The afternoon had been moving slowly, its heat settling into the earth and pressing down on every living thing along the dried riverbed. Dust lay undisturbed across cracked mud, and thorny shrubs stood in brittle silence. It was in this stillness that one of the rangers noticed the shape first, almost mistaking it for a pale stone or a clump of bleached grass. It did not move when the wind passed. It did not shift with the shadows. Only after several quiet seconds did the smallest rise and fall reveal that something there was still breathing. The group slowed without speaking, their boots finding softer paths through the sand, their bodies adjusting instinctively to avoid startling whatever lay ahead. As they drew closer, the outline of a lion cub emerged from the dust. Its small body was stretched unevenly along the ground, ribs faintly visible beneath thin fur dulled by dirt. One hind leg lay at an unnatural angle, and darkened patches clung to its side where blood had dried hours earlier. Its ears barely twitched at the sound of approaching footsteps. The cub's breathing was shallow, each breath arriving late and leaving too soon, as if the effort of pulling air into its lungs required more strength than it had left. Flies gathered and scattered again, unsettled by the movement of people but quickly returning when nothing changed. The rangers stopped several meters away and crouched low. No one reached out. No one rushed forward. They waited, watching for signs of alertness, for the reflexive tension that often came when a wild animal sensed danger. But the cub remained mostly still. One eye opened briefly, clouded with exhaustion, then closed again. Its tail gave a faint twitch, more like a tremor than a signal. Nearby, dry reeds whispered softly as a warm breeze passed through. The riverbed, once a place of movement and water and life, now held only dust and this fragile body struggling quietly to remain part of it. Minutes passed in careful observation. The team noted the rise of the chest, the way the cub's paws curled inward, the small involuntary jerks that traveled through its muscles. These were signs of life, but also of deep fatigue and trauma. There were no tracks nearby to suggest the presence of a mother. No fresh prints, no circling marks of protection. Only scattered paw impressions leading nowhere, fading into hardened ground. One ranger lowered his voice and murmured, "It's okay, little one," not as reassurance but as habit, as a way of reminding himself to remain gentle. Heat shimmered above the sand as the sun continued its slow descent. Shadows stretched longer, offering slight relief from the burning light. The cub shifted once, barely lifting its head before letting it fall back into the dust. Its breath came with a faint rasp now, thin and uneven. The rangers stayed where they were, letting trust build through stillness rather than touch. In the distance, a lone bird crossed the pale sky, its wings catching the last sharp light. Around the riverbed, grasses whispered, and the day quietly leaned toward evening, holding the fragile rhythm of one small life within its fading warmth. The heat did not ease as the afternoon slipped forward. It lingered around the riverbed like a weight, pressing against skin and fur alike. The cub's breathing had grown more uneven, each rise of its chest slightly delayed, each release uncertain. A faint sound escaped its throat now and then, not a call meant to travel far, only a thin, broken sound shaped by fatigue rather than intention. It drifted weakly into the dry air and disappeared almost at once, swallowed by wind and distance. The rangers remained where they were, allowing time to stretch between them and the small body in the dust. No sudden movement disturbed the space. Their posture stayed low, shoulders relaxed, hands resting loosely against their knees. In wildlife work, stillness often spoke louder than motion. It told an injured animal that nothing nearby was hunting, nothing was preparing to strike. It offered a fragile sense of safety built not from control but from restraint. The cub shifted again, this time more noticeably. Its front paws scraped weakly against the ground, sending a small line through the dust. It tried to lift itself, managed only a few centimeters, then collapsed back onto its side. The effort left its sides trembling. Its ears flattened briefly, reacting to its own movement as if surprised by the pain that followed. One eye opened halfway and fixed briefly on the shapes crouched in the distance, then drifted shut again. Sunlight reflected faintly along the curve of its ribs. Dried blood marked a shallow gash near its shoulder, crusted and darkened. The fur around it lay stiff, matted by heat and time. Every few minutes, a small shudder ran through its body, a quiet reminder of how much energy it had already lost. Still it continued to breathe. Still it made small, persistent attempts to remain alert. Slowly, one ranger shifted his weight forward by a few inches. He paused after each movement, allowing the cub to register the change. When the cub stirred, he stopped. When it remained still, he advanced again. The distance closed gradually, measured not in steps but in patience. Another ranger followed at the same pace, mirroring the careful rhythm. A soft voice broke the silence, barely louder than the breeze. "Easy now," someone whispered, not directed at the cub so much as at the moment itself. The words floated briefly, then settled into the dust. The cub responded with another faint sound, weaker than before. Its head tilted slightly, nose lifting as if searching for something familiar in the air. It did not find it. Instead, it found only the slow presence of humans who did not rush and did not retreat. Its breathing steadied just enough to show that the tension in its small body had eased by a fraction. Shadows lengthened across the riverbed, stretching thin lines over cracked earth. The wind moved gently through dry grass nearby, carrying distant scents of animals and fading water. The rangers knelt within several steps now, close enough to see the slow blink of tired eyes, the fine dust collecting along whiskers. No hands reached out yet. Trust was forming not through touch but through shared stillness. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, the light softened, turning harsh brightness into quiet gold. The cub lay surrounded by warmth and silence, breathing carefully, resting between pain and hope. Far away, unseen herds shifted in the evening distance. And beside the empty riverbed, under a sky beginning to cool, a fragile connection settled gently into place, as delicate and real as the fading light. Even as daylight softened and slipped toward evening, no one hurried the next step. The sky began to lose its sharp blue, fading into quieter tones of amber and gray. The heat loosened its grip slowly, releasing the ground from its harsh hold. Around the riverbed, shadows gathered in shallow folds, offering gentle relief. The cub lay where it had been, its breathing still fragile, its body rising and falling in small, uneven motions that seemed almost too light to sustain it. Only when the light had softened enough did the rangers begin to move closer with intention. Their approach remained deliberate, each step placed carefully, each shift of weight measured against the cub's reactions. One knelt beside it, close enough now to feel the faint warmth rising from its fur. Another remained slightly behind, watching for any sign of panic or resistance. Their movements were slow and visible, allowing nothing to appear sudden or threatening. The cub stirred as the nearest ranger reached out. Its muscles tightened briefly, a weak reflex born from instinct rather than strength. A low, breathy sound escaped its throat, barely audible. The ranger paused, hand hovering inches above dusty fur. He waited until the tension eased, until the small body relaxed again into stillness. Only then did his fingers make contact, resting lightly along the cub's side, offering pressure no stronger than a passing leaf. The fur felt coarse beneath his hand, stiff with dirt and dried blood. Beneath it, bones and muscle lay thin and strained. The ranger traced carefully along the shoulder, feeling for swelling, for heat, for signs of deeper damage. Each touch was brief, followed by a pause, giving the cub time to process the sensation. With every contact, its breathing fluttered, then steadied again as though learning that this unfamiliar presence carried no harm. A small medical pack was opened quietly nearby. Supplies were prepared without haste, hands moving with practiced calm. Water was brought close and a cloth dampened slowly. When it touched the cub's wound, it flinched weakly, then stilled. A soft voice followed, barely more than breath. "You're all right," someone murmured, the words offered gently, without expectation. The cub's eyes opened for a moment, unfocused and heavy with exhaustion. They reflected the dimming sky and the still shapes around it. Its ears shifted slightly, responding to the quiet rhythm of human movement. Another shallow breath entered its lungs, then left again, fragile but present. Each breath became something to notice, something to guard. Treatment continued in small fragments. Wounds were cleaned in stages. Fluids were offered in tiny amounts. A light blanket was placed nearby, ready for when the temperature dropped further. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was forced. Survival, in moments like this, depended as much on patience as it did on medicine. Night began to gather along the horizon, bringing cooler air and distant insect calls. Stars appeared one by one, faint at first, then clearer. The cub lay wrapped in careful hands and quiet attention, its body still trembling occasionally, its breath still uncertain. Yet it remained. With each gentle touch, each measured movement, hope grew not as a sudden promise, but as a slow accumulation of small mercies. And beneath the widening sky, as darkness settled softly over the land, one fragile life continued to hold on, guided by restraint, respect, and the steady rhythm of human care. Night had settled fully over the riverbed, bringing with it a quieter kind of uncertainty. The air had cooled, and the land now breathed in slower rhythms, shaped by insect calls and distant, unseen movement. The cub lay wrapped in careful stillness, its small chest continuing its fragile pattern of rise and fall. Treatment had slowed to observation. There was little left to do except watch, wait, and hope that the strength being given had arrived in time. The rangers remained nearby, seated low against the ground. Their silhouettes blended into the darkness, softened by moonlight and shadow. No one spoke. In moments like this, words often felt too heavy. Attention stayed fixed on the cub's breathing, on the slight twitch of its ears, on the way its paws shifted occasionally as if responding to distant sensations beyond conscious thought. Doubt moved quietly among them. It showed itself in lingering glances, in hands resting longer than necessary on knees, in slow exhales that carried unspoken questions. The cub had endured more than most animals its size could withstand. Even now, its survival rested on thin margins. Each minute that passed without change felt both hopeful and uncertain. Then, far beyond the riverbed, something shifted. At first, it was only a subtle disturbance in the grass. A ripple in the darkness. A shape where there had been none. One ranger noticed it and gently touched the arm of another, guiding attention without sound. All eyes turned toward the movement. The night seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, a lioness emerged from the tall grass. Her form was powerful even in restraint, her muscles moving with quiet precision. Moonlight traced the curve of her back and the steady rise of her shoulders. She paused often, lifting her head to scent the air, ears rotating as she gathered information from every direction. Her steps were cautious, deliberate, shaped by uncertainty and instinct. The cub stirred. A faint sound left its throat, thin and uneven, carried weakly across the short distance. It was not loud enough to travel far, but it was enough. The lioness froze. Her head lifted fully now, eyes fixed toward the riverbed. She remained still for several seconds, processing what she had heard. Then she moved again, faster this time, though still careful. Each step brought her closer, her body lowering slightly, ready for danger, ready for defense. The rangers did not move. They retreated slowly, almost imperceptibly, creating space without drawing attention. Their presence faded into shadow. Hands lowered. Breathing softened. The moment no longer belonged to them. When the lioness reached the cub, she stopped just short of touching it. Her nose extended forward, drawing in scent. She circled once, slow and alert. The cub responded with another weak sound, lifting its head a fraction before it dropped again. Recognition passed between them without drama. She leaned down and nudged its side gently with her muzzle. The cub shifted, pressing weakly into the contact. Her tongue followed, rough and careful, cleaning dust and dried blood from its fur. Each motion was precise, instinctive, filled with quiet urgency. For several minutes, nothing else existed. The night held only the rhythm of breath, the soft rasp of grooming, the slow rebuilding of connection. The lioness settled beside her cub, positioning her body to shield it from wind and darkness. One powerful foreleg curved protectively around the small frame. From a distance, unseen and silent, the rangers watched. The grass whispered under a cooling breeze. Stars burned steadily overhead. Somewhere far away, other animals moved through the dark. And near the empty riverbed, beneath a wide and patient sky, nature reclaimed what had almost been lost, holding mother and child together in the quiet language of survival. Morning arrived without urgency, unfolding slowly across the grasslands in pale layers of light. The sky shifted from deep blue to muted gold, and thin clouds caught fire briefly before settling into softer tones. Cool air moved gently over the riverbed, lifting dust and carrying the distant calls of waking birds. After the long uncertainty of night, the land seemed to exhale. The lioness remained where she had rested, her body curved around her cub through the dark hours. Now, as dawn spread across the horizon, she lifted her head and scanned the open plains. Her posture was calm but alert, shaped by instinct and experience. Every sound, every movement of grass, passed through her awareness before she allowed herself to relax again. Beside her, the cub stirred. Its movements were no longer as strained as before. It shifted onto its stomach, pushing weakly at first, then with more coordination. Its breathing had grown steadier during the night, no longer broken into shallow fragments. When it lifted its head, it held it there for several seconds before lowering it again, gathering strength. The rangers watched from a distance, standing quietly along the edge of the riverbed. No one spoke. No one reached for equipment. Their role had ended hours earlier. Now they were witnesses. The cub attempted to stand. Its legs trembled as it rose, joints uncertain, muscles still learning their limits again. For a moment, it swayed, nearly losing balance. The lioness shifted closer, placing her body beside it, offering support without force. The cub leaned briefly into her side, then straightened. It stood. A soft, breathy sound escaped its throat, more effort than voice. The lioness responded by lowering her head and brushing her muzzle along its neck. Her tongue followed, steady and reassuring. The cub remained upright, blinking slowly, absorbing both touch and light. After several minutes, she turned toward the open plains. Her steps were unhurried. She walked a short distance, then paused, looking back. The cub hesitated, watching her, then took its first careful steps forward. Each movement was deliberate. Its paws pressed into damp earth and thin grass, leaving faint impressions that would soon disappear. It followed. Together, they moved away from the riverbed, silhouettes gradually separating from shadow and becoming part of the wider landscape. The cub lagged slightly behind, stopping once to rest, then continuing again. The lioness adjusted her pace without breaking stride, matching its rhythm. Behind them, the rangers remained still. Some lowered their heads briefly. Others kept their eyes fixed on the retreating forms. There was no celebration, no visible relief. Only quiet acceptance and something deeper, carried inward rather than expressed. They had shared a fragile moment with a life that now belonged fully to the wild again. As the sun climbed higher, light spread across rolling grass and distant trees. Insects stirred. Birds crossed the open sky. The world resumed its endless motion. The lions grew smaller with each step, their shapes blending into the terrain until they were no longer distinct, then no longer visible at all. Only flattened grass and fading tracks remained, soon softened by wind. The rangers turned back slowly. And far beyond the riverbed, where land met sky, a young lion walked beside his mother into the widening morning, carried forward by quiet strength, disappearing into a world that had given him another chance to belong.